What's up, everyone? Welcome to April. It is April now here on planet Earth. The calendar has turned. It's pushing 70 degrees here on the East Coast after a long, cold, largely miserable winter from a weather perspective. Maybe spring is springing here on April 1st, April Fool's Day at the Call Sheet Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Smith. Going to dive into a really interesting topic today, NIL, the transfer portal, what's going on with all of that. The college sports landscape has devolved into a Wild West, but there are some interesting proposals, both official, as in kicking around the U.S. Senate, also proposals on the state level, also proposals that are purely at the intellectual level at this point, being worked on. That would rein in some of the madness that is NIL and the transfer portal. We're going to jump into all of that today. First, with it being April Fool's Day, I'm going to spare you any cheesy April Fool's bit. I'm not going to come on here and announce breaking news. A.J. Brown has been traded to the New England Patriots. Blah, 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 April Fools. But I will say this. By April Fool's is it's not a holiday. I don't know what you would even call it, but it's a day where you should use your discretion. Know your audience when plotting April Fool's jokes. I once had a student in class. I happened to ask my class, anybody ever be a part of a good April Fool's prank? And a student raised his hand and told me that his father did an April Fool's joke on his mother one time when his older sister was a baby and hid the older sister in the house. And in a panic, rushed into the bedroom with the mother, like, I can't find, whatever her name was. I was in the kitchen. She was in the playroom. She's gone. I can't find her. They frantically searched through the house. The mother was like in a frenzy about to call 911 when the father was like, April Fools. And this student said his mother was so mad she kicked him out of the house for a few days. Like, he was literally like sleeping on the couch at a friend's house for a couple of days until she calmed down. Use your discretion, man, especially when it comes to moms. Don't do my kid's been abducted as an April Fool's joke. I think that's maybe pushing the line a little bit. Anyway, today, NIL, transfer portal, etc. There's some interesting legislation, as I mentioned, that has been proposed by former Auburn football coach Tommy Tuberville. Not a guy that I'm usually finding myself in agreement with. I find his political policies to be Neanderthal at best. I think he gives a bad name to football coaches with some of the stuff that he's actually proposed as a politician, because people are like, oh, it's an idiot football coach proposing these things. But I think he's kind of spot on with some of his ideas on how to rein in NIL and the transfer portal, extended years of eligibility, etc. Going to get to those proposals in a second. Before I do, a quick timeline. Just for those of you who may be wondering, like, how did we get here? How did we get to this moment now where kids are suing to go back to college because they're getting paid so much money that they don't want to turn pro? It used to be the opposite. You used to have people trying to sue to get into the draft. Why do I have to go to college for a year or two? I should be able to go right to the NBA or right to the NFL. And now it's the opposite. Trinidad Chambliss won his lawsuit with the NCAA that granted him a 6th year of eligibility at Ole Miss, despite the fact that had he come out, he would almost certainly be the second quarterback taken and a first-round draft pick. But as a first-round draft pick, he was going to make less money annually than he would in NIL. So he sued to go back to school. How did we get there? How did we get to this place? All right, quick history. Way back in 1956, the NCAA began to allow student athletes to receive athletic scholarships. without any regard for their academic ability or their financial situation, right? So it was an aid based or a need based thing, or it was a reward for good grades. You could get money from a university, but it wasn't purely athletically based until 1956. And then in 1975, the NCAA updated its regulations and it limited scholarships to tuition, books, and board. And that was a very interesting decision because it really hamstrung student athletes financially. Scholarships were limited to tuition, books, and board. And the way the law was written, that was said to provide you everything. But if you wanted some spending money, you couldn't have an off-campus job. You couldn't earn any income outside of that. It was very common. Like when I was in college, I had a job that the football program set up for me, working in the weight room. It was basically, I mean, I think people understand how these types of jobs went. I was working in the weight room. I had to be in the weight room from 1 to 5 o'clock, 2 days a week. I got paid a little bit of money to do it, but I wasn't really doing anything. I was working out. And if there were, somebody needed a towel, I got them a towel. But it was a low labor or low intensity job. And I got paid a little bit of money for that, but I wasn't on scholarship. Had I been on scholarship, had I been a full scholarship athlete, I would not have been able to hold that job because that would have been considered additional compensation above and beyond the laws that were in place. My best friend from high school played football at the University of Pittsburgh. Offensive lineman at Pitt, played with some future NFL stars like Mark Stepnoski, was coached by Paul Hackett there. He was on full scholarship. And I remember him picking me up one time on the way back to New Jersey. We were both going home. And he was like, I hate to ask you, but can you pay for gas? I don't have any money. He wasn't allowed to have a job on campus. And as universities began to increasingly profit off of their student athletes, whether in the form of jersey sales or video games or marketing them to promote their football program, the question became, is this fair? Yes, these guys are on scholarship, but many of these scholarship kids come from low income environments. What are they doing about spending money? I mean, the university is saying, we're taking care of everything. Your meals, your tuition, your room and board, all of that. Anything above and beyond that is illegal, but that, I'm a college kid. How am I paying for gas to get home in my car? We're going out on Saturday night with a bunch of buddies. I need some money in my pocket. So in 2009, former UCLA basketball star Ed O'Bannon was a plaintiff in a class action suit against the NCAA. And what O'Bannon and his fellow plaintiffs claimed was that a video basketball game done by EA Sports that used their likeness without consent or compensation, they should be able to get a piece of that, of the profits. That it was unfair that the NCAA and EA Sports could profit off of Ed O'Bannon's likeness. They could use him as a character in the video game, and he would not see any profit from it whatsoever. And his argument was, it's my labor, what I do on the basketball court, that they're profiting from. How can I not have a piece of my own labor? And that case kicked around the courts for a while. And finally, in 2019, at the state level, California became the first state to pass NIL legislation. They passed an act called the Fair Pay to Play Act. And that prohibited NCAA schools from punishing student athletes by disallowing them from some NIL compensation. In essence, what they said was, Ed O'Bannon's right. And beyond that, not only should you be able to profit off of your name, image, and likeness, whether it's through a video game or a jersey sale, but it opened the door to students being paid. And obviously, that's where we are now, because the Supreme Court ruled just a couple of years ago that these employees, that any legislation in place keeping individuals from maximizing their potential income off of their own labor is illegal. Long story short, not only can they earn NIL, but universities can pay them. Universities can pay them. And there's now loose legislation in place that tries to govern that. Initially, the number was set at 20.4 million, I believe was the number. That you had up to $20.4 million as a university to disperse among all of your student athletes in a manner that you saw fit. You would determine. And like, for example, the University of Massachusetts had 534 college athletes participating in their various athletic programs, and they had about $20 million to dole out. Now, look, if they wanted to give $18 million to the starting quarterback on the football team and divide up the other $2 million over the rest of those 500 some athletes, they could do that. You know, they could disperse it evenly. Hey, everybody gets this. Everybody gets $14,000, whatever the math works out to. You know, or obviously they could allocate it on a need basis. They could allocate it on the basis of which sports they think will benefit the university most, which is what a lot of schools do. They pay their football players the most and their basketball players the next most, and it trickles on down. And if you happen to be on the college badminton team, they might kick you a little bit, but you're not getting millions. Now, that's been controversial because of two reasons. One, where's that money come from? Is that taxpayer-funded money? And then two, should the public have the right to look at how much each university is spending on NIL? Because that $20 million cap is out the window when it comes to private NIL. Meaning, if Dunkin' Donuts comes to Fernando Mendoza when he's, you know, the quarterback at Indiana and says, hey, we're going to pay you to be in our commercials, that's NIL, they can pay him as much money as they want. Should we be able to know what universities are spending that money on? How much exactly of their budget goes to NIL? Who gets it? How much do they get, etc.? At the moment, universities are fighting against that. They're arguing that they should not have to reveal what they're spending that money on because of individual privacy rights. You shouldn't have the right to know how much Indiana University is paying Fernando Mendoza. That's a private issue. And B, they're citing that competitive disadvantage, that if you tell me that the quarterback at, Michigan is getting $2 million a year, what's to stop our rival at Michigan State from offering him $2.1 million? You're going to, by publishing this, we're going to get into this Price is Right scenario, right? Where you bid $600 on the thing that's on the stage, and the guy next to you bid $601. That you're just going to have people constantly trying to top the next. So they've pushed back. Colleges have pushed back against making this information public. But a thing I think that's really interesting is this: the Wisconsin State Senate recently passed an NIL bill that provides taxpayer funding to support University of Wisconsin athletics. The bill allocates $14.6 million in taxpayer money annually to cover University of Wisconsin athletic facilities. But what that does is it allows them to use that money specifically for facilities and then clear up other money, which would have gone to the facilities originally, for NIL. So it's a backdoor to using taxpayer funded money for NIL purposes. It's crazy. We are in a wild, wild west landscape where the states, the courts, the federal government, where are the borders, man? Where are the guardrails? Nobody really seems to have an answer for that. So just to summarize, what we have right now is a soft cap on NIL payments in the neighborhood of $20.4 million per year per institution that they can dole out how they choose. We have no cap on third-party NIL, meaning the money that comes from corporations and private entities for NIL purposes. And right now, we have no consensus on how to legislate this from any government body, state, local, federal, NCAA, etc. And it doesn't appear as though there's any solutions to NIL in the near future. Any attempt to cap it is going to be struck down by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has been very definitive in their stance on money as free speech. When you go back to the famous Citizens versus United ruling, where the courts determined in regard to campaign contributions to political campaigns that what you do with your money is a First Amendment free speech issue, and that the government can't cap it. So if I want to give $1 billion to the Republican or the Democratic Party to help fund political campaigns, I can write that check. You can't cap it. That's a prohibition on my free speech. So that same logic is being applied to NIL. So as far as NIL, it doesn't look like at the moment anything's really going to rein this in. College kids like Trinidad Chambliss are going to continue to sue to go back to school because they're probably, I don't know what he's making exactly, but I'm going to guess Trinidad Chambliss is making $5 to $10 million in college. And if he goes to the NFL, he's going to be slotted into a rookie pay scale that's going to pay him far less than that. But the one thing where there is movement, there are proposals that could really rein the scenario is in the transfer portal. Because that's the other thing that really now has made college football a wild west. I remember listening to Bill Belichick talk about taking over the job at North Carolina. And he was like, 40 some guys from last year's team, meaning the team he inherited, are in the portal. I had Matt Lombardi on this podcast. Matt's the quarterbacks coach at North Carolina, former NFL coach, former quarterbacks coach with Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers. Player I coached Matt Lombardi when he was a high school senior. And he was very transparent about it. He said it sucks. North Carolina ended up between players who left and players they had to bring in with 70 some individuals changing in and out of the program in some way, shape, or form. And he just talked about how unbelievably difficult it is to try to build a team when there's so much transience. Now, it can be done. I mean, Curt Cignetti just showed us it can be done. He won the national championship at Indiana with a team stocked full of transfers. But a lot of those guys were his guys he'd coached at James Madison before he came to Indiana, who he brought with him to Indiana. That's a little bit different than having to go out and treat your entire roster like it's one big free agency period and pull guys in from this school and that school who you have really no attachment to or have never coached before. So Tommy Tuberville, I mentioned, former Auburn football coach, now a senator from Alabama. He has introduced the Student Athlete Act, which is now aiming to manage the transfer portal and also eligibility. I won't get into eligibility right now, but real quick, Tuberville's proposal is the following. He has proposed that all athletes should get one, no questions asked transfer where it does not affect their eligibility whatsoever. Their they're now free to transfer, and the NCAA can't do anything about it. But his bill would give them significant control over what happens after that first transfer. You get one transfer during your eligibility period. Use it however you want. You can use it as a freshman. You can use it before your senior year, whatever. But that's it. That's all you get. And now, if you want to transfer again after that first one, you're going to lose your eligibility. And in essence, what they're saying is that you can't simply, on scholarship, go from one situation to another and continue to be paid by these institutions who are showing a sense of loyalty, right? They're basically saying like, hey, we're going to pay you a full scholarship. We're going to honor that, because this is another element of it, which we'll get to in a second. But you're not going to uphold your end of the bargain. That point I just made is important. The universities now under this bill are, when they give their scholarships, are, unless they have a compelling reason to pull the scholarship, required to honor them so long as you're at the university. So it's a two-way street. If Penn State offers you a scholarship and you accept it, unless they have a compelling reason to take it away from you, meaning criminal acts and things like that, not simply like, hey, you're not good enough, we don't think you're good enough, they're going to honor your scholarship. But you can only transfer one time. You transfer that second time, you lose your scholarship money. That's interesting. I'll wrap it up with this. There's an answer there somewhere. The current system, I think, is unsustainable. You got guys coming into the NFL draft that have been in 3 and 4 different schools. It's working for them. But what we're seeing because of NIL and the transfer portal is a bit of a separation between those who know how to manage it and benefit from it and those who don't. In football, Indiana is an amazing story. And you could probably argue you could never get an Indiana national championship without the transfer portal and the rules being turned upside down. And that's true, but they're an outlier, because when you look at what's happening in college football, and way even more so, that's terrible grammar, even more so in college basketball, the haves are becoming more empowered and the have-nots are becoming longer shots. This year's NCAA men's basketball tournament had no real Cinderella stories. The biggest long shot to make it to the Sweet 16 was Texas as an 11 seed. Texas is not a long shot. They're not a George Mason. Texas is no Cinderella. They're not Florida International. And the reason I think you're seeing less of that is because the big, powerful schools have the advantages when it comes to NIL, third-party NIL for sure, with their trustees and their boosters and what they're now allowed to do. And they're killing it in the transfer portal. Again, Indiana's the outlier. Go look at what's happened in college football. The best teams are getting better. And the middle of the road teams are now oftentimes being pushed down. I mean, it's like what's happened economically in the United States. The disappearing middle class. You're seeing a similar thing in college sports. I think this is fascinating stuff. Thank you for taking that journey with me. I don't know if we solved any problems. We didn't, but I think we hopefully outlined what the NCAA and lawmakers now have to grapple with in order to try to bring some semblance of order to college athletics. And it'll be fascinating to watch. All right, also fascinating, Friday's show. My guest on the hot route, Ocean City High School head basketball coach John Bruno, who just won the state championship with a roster that includes 0 college basketball commits. They just won the state championship with a roster that doesn't have one kid headed to play college basketball. Can you still win with great coaching, hard work, good chemistry, great teamwork, etc.? Absolutely. John Bruno's Red Raiders just proved that by winning the state championship. He's going to come on Friday, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about chemistry. and teamwork and coaching kids in this new era. And you can still get it done, even if you're not the most talented team. That's going to be a great hot route conversation. Join me then. Until then, hope everybody has a great day. Don't get fooled. We don't get fooled again on April Fool's Day.